break of dawn to late night and get the truth straight from ADSN.
ADSN is back on air. James is nowhere to be found, so you're stuck with me today. James, if you're out there, call me, let me know you're okay. Just let me know you're around. I miss you, buddy. But this week, there's been big news, big tech going to trial. We've got Meta in court with Mark Zuckerberg on the stand testifying. We've got Google decisions being made, an upending of big tech and the future for the internet. And so we're bringing on today Alex Heath, deputy editor of The Verge, who's been on the ground in the courthouse reporting. So he's coming live, ADSN, giving us the scoop. Let's get to you, Alex. All right, now we're welcomed by Alex Heath, deputy editor for The Verge. Alex, you've been reporting on this Google and Meta, these trials, these kind of the monopoly discussions that have been happening. Maybe can we just start with you giving us a lay of the land? Like, where are we right now with kind of what's happening with these two trials?
Well, Google, I think for you all, this is particularly important. Google lost its ad tech monopoly case this week. So a judge ruled that Google was a monopoly in its ad tech platform. This is specifically the off Google advertising business that it has with the web and publishers. It's only about 10 to 12% of Google's business, but it's a significant thing for the web as a whole. So that's going to probably radically change how the open web works from an advertising perspective. And then, this week Meta went to trial over the FTC seeking to break up Instagram and WhatsApp. And this is a trial that has been 5 years in the making. Was first filed under the Trump administration, version 1, then the Biden administration refiled. Finally just went to trial. I was there for the first few days where Mark Zuckerberg was the star witness, and he was on the stand for probably 13 hours in total.
Oh, brutal. Well, we definitely want to dive into Meta in a second, but maybe let's start with Google. So I think you sort of touched on it, but I think it's kind of maybe a key thing for people just to, I think, got to be aware of it, was that like this was really nothing to do with their owned and operated inventory. This is purely about them helping basically third-party publishers monetize. That's the correct read on it, right?
Yeah, that's right. So it's big for Google. I mean, it is it's a dwindling but still significant part of Google's business. I think the implications for how it ties that to its other advertising business is a little more significant for Google over time. It's actually just really significant for everyone else, literally everyone else who either buys or sells advertising on the web.
Totally. Yeah. I put out a post about it yesterday, but my kind of initial take on this is Google's going to just basically copy all of Meta's ad playbook now. So you'll have like just PMax is just going to be Google ads. It's going to be pretty simple. I think it's going to be great for them from a margin perspective. And they have all the inventory at this point to do it. And then to your point, for the open web, this is like kind of a punch I don't think that it can really take. Like if you think of the amount of demand, like differentiated demand that Google delivers to the open web, like even if you replace all the pipes, it's all that passive demand that Google was bringing to third-party publishers. I think that's the thing that's like you can't kind of replicate it. And so I'm curious if you've seen in kind of your reporting, like, is it pretty? Do you think that the publisher community is adequately worried, or maybe my read is off?
I don't know. I think the publisher community is ready for some real competition in this space, is my read of it. I mean, maybe I'm coming at it with a particular slant because the parent company of The Verge, where I work, Vox Media, has a programmatic ad platform called Concert that we have other publishers on. And one of our executives was actually on the witness stand during this Google trial. So I think, my parent company has incentives for this to happen, but I don't know. The read I've gotten is kind of a sigh of relief, actually, from a lot of publishers who feel that they've been forced to use Google's ad tech stack because of the way it ties it to the rest of its business. But you're saying there's a different angle.
Yeah, I think to me, just you think about like all of the advertisers that Google has access to just on the demand side, right? Like millions and millions of small businesses, and you got the only other people that really kind of I would say have that scale is Meta. Those advertisers unfortunately aren't going to go. I don't think they're going to start buying on other random platforms. And I think a lot of ways they didn't even know that their ads were even being served up on third-party sites, right? Like that wasn't their goal in a lot of cases. Their goal was just to drive sales. And so I think those advertisers are gonna be totally fine in this new world where Google basically just monetizes every surface they have. And I think that is something that I think maybe the publisher community maybe not kind of thinking through, just because like direct sales alone is tough, right? Like you guys can do it. You guys are unique, but for your kind of average, publisher, you really just need that passive demand. And I think that's kind of my like between that and the shift to AI, it feels like this could be kind of the a new phase of like I think what we thought of as open web, I think is going to change quite a bit.
What about the theory that, I mean, I guess it's not a theory, the judge ruled that this happened, that Google was able to artificially inflate pricing in an anti-competitive way because of just its power and its dominance in this market? Wouldn't the market become better for a small publisher who really needs, an affordable way to advertise, and also wants, competing services that really try to innovate? I don't know. I mean, the competing exchanges have just been lighting me up with, their CEOs are thrilled with this news because they feel like they finally will be able to get into this market.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you're going to have probably better ad tech, and I think you'll have less expensive ad tech. But I don't know. I'm skeptical that you're going to have more ad demand as a result of this, right? Like the demand. If you think of like the open web is sort of like supply rich and demand poor.
Yeah.
Whereas you could think of like Amazon is like demand rich, supply poor. So like they're really good at like exporting demand. And then like Meta and Google are both demand rich and supply rich and growing. And so I think Google is going to be, I think that's the hard part, is like who's going to bring that differentiated demand to the open web now? If not Google. Meta's already pulled back from Audience Network. So who's going to be? It may be Amazon, but then you kind of just replace Amazon. You replace Google with Amazon. So that may be one of the unintended consequences. I'm not sure.
That's interesting. That's why you are an ad tech expert and I'm not.
Well, I could be totally wrong, but I don't know, Daniel. What's your take on it? You've heard me opine about this in the past.
Unsurprisingly, I agree. I mean, I think we've kind of seen like there's a reason that demand has aggregated to Google and Facebook, and we've seen like fragmented markets don't get the same share for a lot of reasons, right? Like advertisers don't want to go to 100 different places to buy 100 different surfaces, all of which are using different tech, have different bid methodologies, require different buying strategies and buying tools. And so, I don't think this is bad for Google necessarily. Like, I think this open web demand that Google had now largely just gets dispersed back into their O&O and probably Meta, like realistically. To go buy the long tail becomes really hard and really fragmented. And advertisers, at least that have those budgets, those larger budgets that are going to be meaningful, are just going to consolidate it into the places that they feel comfortable, as opposed to distributing to 100 new surfaces and 100 new supply providers. And I mean, I think like if we look at like the Trade Desk or kind of other large buy-side platforms, like the Trade Desk came out with their top, what was it, top 100 publishers. I mean, they're clearly focused on where the supply is, where the quality is. And so I think, James, to your point, like the long tail is what's going to suffer here. Like the Verge will be fine. It's, the individual publishers or the individual kind of page owners, they're the ones that are going to suffer, because how is demand going to get to them?
Well, I believe you guys.
well,
We'll see.
well, I do think I was listening to your conversation on the Vergecast about this stuff, and I thought, this kind of maybe as like uh, in parallel to the Meta
Hmm.
conversation, maybe it's sort of enlightening because it sounds like from everything that I've read and what you reported on, like it was pretty clear Google was going to lose this.
Yeah.
I really don't think Google cares that much. I really think they've been planning for this for a long
Yeah.
time in some ways. If you saw how PMax was integrating YouTube, YouTube's always been cut off from open web. Like I think this is easy for them. They should sell this thing, sell the offsite stuff and just kind of go do Google Ad Manager for Google Ads. I think that will be pretty clean and easy for them. Um, but on the kind of the other side of it for Meta, you know, if Meta was forced to break up these apps, that would be, I think, just hugely disruptive. But maybe can you kind of explain to people like what that court case really is, and then can you also just explain like how they're looking at Meta's competitive landscapes? I thought that part of your reporting was pretty fascinating.
Yeah, this case is a weird one. I mean, the idea behind it, I think, emotionally feels right for a lot of people, which is that people feel that Instagram and maybe WhatsApp too, to an extent, are worse under Meta's. They're definitely not worse from like a business perspective, right? But like, I think people have a feeling that, man, and maybe it's just because they don't like Meta, they don't like Zuckerberg, but like, man, I really wish Instagram was not owned by Meta, right? So like, I think that's a broad feeling that the government is tapping into, that makes sense to me. Where it doesn't make sense to me a lot is that I'm just not sure that the FTC understands actually how social media works. And it was pretty interesting actually being in the courtroom, watching opening arguments, watching cross-examination of Zuckerberg and then Sheryl Sandberg. And I just think there's a fundamental misunderstanding of where Meta's leverage actually lies. There was actually, relevant for this show, there was really little time spent on ad tech or on the ad business. I mean, there were questions about, one of the FTC's theories is that, because it can't say that Meta's raised prices because the services are free, that ad load is a substitute for this kind of way of looking at consumer harm under antitrust law. So the idea being that Meta's been able to increase ad load in Instagram. WhatsApp doesn't have ads, but in Instagram, because people don't have competition for a very specific subset of social media that the FTC is defining that only includes Meta, Snapchat, and MeWe.
What
And
is MeWe?
your guess is good as mine. I actually looked at my inbox, and I've been pitched by MeWe a few times over the years. They're on some kind of blockchain. I think Tim Berners-Lee was involved at some point, and they claim to have like 20 million users. They got a surge of traffic during like the Hong Kong protests, but it is by no means like in the conversation. I've been covering social media for a very long time, and Zuckerberg was actually asked by Meta's lead attorney if he had heard of it prior to this case, and he said no. And interestingly, like market definitions really can make or break an antitrust case, and I expected the FTC to at least talk about it a little bit, and they didn't ask Zuckerberg about MeWe once. So there was a lot of time spent on Snapchat, and what they're trying to do is define this like area of social media where they say the services mainly exist to share things between friends and family. What cuts against that are frankly the facts, which is that the majority of time spent on Facebook and Instagram, and I'm talking like 80% or something, is video. It's not actually talking to friends and family. And that these products have just radically changed from the early days. And that, it's why Zuck bought WhatsApp, is that a lot of this sharing has moved to private messaging and has been that way for many years now. So it just kind of showed how the FCC doesn't really understand the market and how it works, or is at least intentionally not presenting it as it actually is, so that it can get its market definition through. And then I'd be curious to hear what you guys think about this on the ad tech side. This idea that that people looking at ads is a tax and is a consumer harm, And then Meta's lawyer is like saying like, this is ridiculous. You can just quickly scroll past them. And Zuck even said at one point, like, we've considered a feed of only ads because we get data showing that like our audience like really likes our ads. And like, you can't lie with the revenue numbers they report, right? Like, it's something is working, right? People have to look at these things for this revenue to be what it is. So yeah, and there's, everyone probably listening to this has bought an ad off of Instagram, or I'm sorry, has bought a product off an ad that they've seen on Instagram. So yeah, I'd be curious to hear like what you guys think of that ad tech angle on Meta specifically.
I mean, I guess maybe before we get to the ad techs, I think that's something that James and I have talked a lot about, kind of off ADSN. But maybe just like looking at kind of the FTC bringing this 5 years ago. I mean, the FTC reviewed those acquisitions of Instagram and WhatsApp, and I think a lot has been made by a lot of analysts and a lot of reporters like yourself. Just that, like, the FTC was okay with it, right? Instagram wasn't Instagram when it was purchased, not the Instagram that we know. WhatsApp was big, but obviously they've done a lot with it. And so what is the FTC's response to, hey, we allowed it then, but now we're not comfortable with it?
That's actually, I think, the weakest argument to say this case should be thrown out. I mean, the FTC, just because they review something doesn't mean they can't go back and undo it if it's found later to be anti-competitive. They have pretty strong precedent on that. And I don't really think that argument's going to stand. And it's not even really an argument I saw Meta make in court. It's obviously like, yeah, if you thought this was a problem then, why didn't you do something? I think that's a reasonable question. And there was just a lot of revisiting that time with internal documents and emails found through discovery about how they were thinking about Instagram, how they were thinking about the competitive landscape. I've never thought about path so much for the last 10 years as it was being talked about in this courtroom. It was actually just a fun kind of trip down memory lane, having covered a lot of this stuff. But we're just looking at how they saw those apps, and they of course saw them as competitors, right? Like, I think anyone who works in tech just like knows this without even needing to see the evidence that's why those apps were bought. But I think Meta actually has a pretty strong argument that they were not direct competitors yet when they were bought. And that another part of this is that the FTC really needs to show that not only did they buy them to buy out a competitor, but that they basically deprived the market from that competition or those services. And Meta has a pretty strong case that, like, no, those apps are thriving and doing way better than they would have on their own. And so, yeah, that's the gist of that.
Yeah, that I feel like on the grounds of it, on the basis of like that there's a monopoly on how you can like waste your time on your phone. I find that argument to be ridiculous, just given TikTok and YouTube and Discord and Reddit and I mean even ChatGPT, and I know like they're talking about like social networks and X. Like there's zero chance. In some ways, the same way how I think it's like I think Google is I think Google had very bad practices with the publishers, but to say they have a monopoly on advertising, given all the competition between Google, Meta, and Amazon right now, and that Apple's going to come like soaring in relatively soon, I think it's like disingenuous. I think so I mean, I'm generally pretty pro Meta, even all the horrible things they try doing to Snap. But I think it is interesting that like if for somehow the government did win this, is the goal to break them up? It's to force.
Yeah.
It's just a pure forced divestiture of the assets.
Yeah. It's the most. I mean, you have to start with with the most dramatic thing, because you'll never really get that. So yeah, they're going to start with the most serious thing they could do, which is that the odds of that actually happening are very low. I don't think the government's ever broken up a big tech company actually. Google maybe soon, but so far, because Microsoft was settled, and I assume this one would be too. And like they have some kind of sexy, damning, evidence that like Zuckerberg himself thought about spinning off Instagram. There was a 2018. It was really the only time in court where you could feel the Meta trial bench like sit up a little bit and be like, oh, when like they showed this internal email that Mark wrote to his team about this is 2018, saying, we should maybe consider spinning off Instagram. I foresee, especially under a future Democratic administration, calls to break us up, and companies tend to do better on their own anyway. Like, he straight up said this in an email. At the time they were creating this like family of apps structure and restructuring the company. And, if you're being sympathetic to them, maybe he was also saying that because they were just really mismanaging Instagram at the time, and they really were disjointed in how they were approaching the portfolio. It was this friction that caused the Instagram founders to leave around the same time, which was like he decided to pull in the acquisitions under like kind of one leadership chain, Chris Cox, and basically have them work more closer together and not directly overlap with each other like they had been. And he said, like, look, I did this because Instagram was hitting 1 billion users, and we just needed to balance the fact that if we put too much, behind Instagram, it would hurt Facebook. And the FTC saying, well, that's evidence that, that you shouldn't have Instagram and Facebook.
Yeah, it's a hard, to me at least, you said it is a hard argument, because I imagine like you have to prove consumer harm in this case. And to your point, like going back to the ads, we've all bought on the ads. Their algorithm is great. It should be additive to the feeds that you're looking at, right? If it's not, it's pulling your attention away, and you're probably looking for an alternative. And because it's a free service and there are 100 other options for attention, it seems like from my point of view, like a hard case to make that they're not harming advertisers. They're helping advertisers and companies distribute product and get in front of the right people. They're giving consumers an engaging experience. If it wasn't, we wouldn't be spending the same amount of time there. And so I don't know. I'm kind of a Facebook homer as well, but like it just seems tough to prove the consumer harm.
Yeah, I think Google, when you contrast this to Google, I think a good test of whether something feels like a monopoly is like, I have to use it and it sucks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that feeling is probably more felt by the advertisers on Meta than the users.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen some compelling arguments that if you actually wanted to kind of attack any kind of competitive monopoly type behavior, you would focus on the ad tech. And I don't know if you guys agree with that at all, but I think it's really hard to say that that they're not competing on making the ads as relevant as possible.
Yeah, I agree with that. The way to attack it, if you really wanted to hurt them, basically two things you do, I think. One, you attack the scale. So the reason why it's so useful is because you've just made
network
the
effects.
aggregation.
Yeah,
it's the aggregation of it. It's why Google is totally fine, right? Because of YouTube, right?
Yeah.
So there's a couple things that happen. One is the scale is so immense that you can have a natural place for all of the merchants to be on the platform. There's like a reason for a company to be on these things, which is super useful. So you could really easily turn them into advertisers, which is like so much of the challenge for an independent media company is like just getting the advertisers there. So that's like one part that's like incredibly compelling. And then I would say the other thing too, for all the AI and training runs that are going to be happening, like imagine how useful Instagram is for them, right? Like imagine Meta AI is going to be much better as a result of all the usage they have across all those platforms. So I think that, those are the big advantages they have. Like an independent YouTube would be so harmful to Gemini. Like as an example, right? Like, especially as like Gemini, like, even if you imagine a world where Google's forced to sell Chrome, then they're basically going to try to get everyone to download the Gemini app. And the Gemini app is going to become like the social network, kind of the ChatGPT social network kind of play that those guys are running. So Yeah, all of it is say is I think like the ad tech, it's not even about the ad tech, it's about the advertisers,
Yeah.
right? And the advertisers come from the aggregation. The ad tech is kind of a commodity. I mean, every ad platform basically works the same for all practical purposes.
Yeah,
So
no,
I think
I
it's
guess
about the
I
scale.
meant the experience that advertisers have, right? There's like, it's a meme of just like, my Meta business account like just went down for days and I can't get anyone on the phone. And
Yes.
it's like when that happens and you feel that, it's like, man, this company
Yeah.
doesn't care. Why doesn't it care? Maybe because it doesn't need to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so, but I think they also have so many advertisers. They want to fix that problem.
Yeah.
They're just millions of advertisers deep. And I do think one thing that's probably interesting for just like in general is and we did this at Snap quite a bit. Um, is you're constantly when you're running these auctions and you have like these news feeds, you're really trying to make sure that the ad experience doesn't hurt any organic behavior.
Yeah.
So like their incentives are to get you to stay on the app. And so that's why you'll see a lot of time, like the ads, like better ads do make better experiences. So I think for the government to make that argument, I think is pretty tough.
Yeah. I mean, we all know, and I know for sure, I've seen a lot of internal meta documents over the years, is like the thing that they goal against is time spent, right? Because that's the business model. The FTC seems to understand the incentives as it relates to the actual business model. And the problem is for the FTC, if you try to like create a monopoly around time spent, you can't, right? You can't argue that Meta has a monopoly anywhere. And Meta actually showed some data internally that Facebook and Instagram traffic grew double digits when TikTok was briefly down in the US. And you guys will appreciate this. There were so many digs at Snap from Meta throughout the whole trial. The chart had like Snap at the very bottom with like 1 or 2% traffic surge. It was
Oh,
actually so
so sad.
they were actually so demeaning to Snap that Snap's counsel came into the courtroom like a couple days later. Also because they like quote unquote accidentally disclose like confidential Snap data in some of the slides because they didn't properly redact it. And like Snap came into the courtroom and was like, we don't trust them. Like, you got to keep them from like talking about us. Like, they just kept like shitting on Snap and Evan. Um, but yeah, I don't know, man. I think what you would do is you would look at the network effects. You would say, okay, what is the actual cost for users? Because now if we're talking about users and not advertisers, was the actual cost for users on these networks, and it's switching. It's switching to something else and restarting your graph from scratch, restarting your profile from scratch. So I think a much more compelling argument for checking a platform this large is interoperability. Is this idea of like once you reach a certain scale, you legally have to allow for interoperability of some kind. It's a privacy nightmare. It actually cuts against the direction of regulation. But it would be the way you would actually address, I think, the competitive moat that a system like Meta's has. I don't know what you guys think about that, but that's my working theory.
My only question would be like if you use something like TikTok where like you can the algorithm is good enough for a cold start where like your previous graph is almost less important,
Yeah.
right? That I wonder if that does make it the interoperability thing. I think like it's one of those things I think it would happen and nothing would change sort of. Like
Yeah,
I think cold start AI driven apps are going to be really really good.
totally.
So
Well, I mean, from the purpose of how the FTC is arguing this, which they're trying to focus and doing it, I think, way incorrectly, but they're trying to focus on the market of sharing with actual other people, which is a network
yes,
effect
I
business. Not a so like let's
yes.
separate the entertainment kind of mindless scrolling business that
Yeah.
Facebook apparently is. It's interesting as all this is happening, Zuckerberg is very much trying to return Facebook back to that original sharing dynamic. He's calling it like OG Facebook because he knows that those network effects are what makes a service durable, not because like what could happen is that another app with better AI could just show up like TikTok did and just totally kill them on the passive discovery side that doesn't rely on network effects. So he knows this is the long-term competitive durable advantage or network effects. And so I'm like, why don't you attack that and mandate that at a certain scale that network needs to be porous. And I don't know how it would
Yeah.
work practically. And like I said, it
Yeah.
cuts against the trend of how the government is also pushing for regulating these platforms. But it seems to be the only way you could actually address what the FTC is trying to argue.
Yeah, well,
I don't know.
and I wonder too, because I believe isn't there a third Apple monopoly lawsuit
Yeah,
Yeah.
happening right
it
now?
hasn't gone to trial yet, but yeah.
Because your approach would then, I think, dovetail really well into a lot of the iMessage stuff,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just like, yeah, maybe you should consult for them and see if you can get them to.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely really interesting. I wonder when is the Apple one starting? Do you know?
I don't know actually if it's even really been announced. I mean, I think maybe it's just rumored at this point.
Oh, okay.
The DOJ one.
Mm.
Yeah.
And so, Alex, I guess before we let you go, like what is next for the Meta trial, and then what's like the next step for Google now that
Yeah.
decision's been made? Like, what's next, and then we got to get you back on as updates
Yeah.
occur.
Well, I'll do Google first. So Google is actually going to remedy phase for losing on search monopoly, I think next week. It's only going to be a couple weeks trial. That's basically, okay, we've ruled you're a monopoly in search. Now, how do we fix it? So we will see whatever that outcome is very soon. And obviously that could have tremendous impact on the tech industry at large. The Meta trial is going to be lengthy. It's like 7 weeks. There's going to be a lot more witnesses. It's going to feel like, if you're there, it's going to feel like a Stanford business class, like seminar on the history of Silicon Valley. It's going to be like all these investors and the founders of Instagram and WhatsApp executives, and then all, it'll be really interesting for nerds like me. But it won't be, a remedy. So after that, the judge will issue an opinion. He'll rule either in favor or against the FTC's argument. And then there will be a remedy phase for that as well. And I don't think the Meta one will take super long. Like I would be shocked if we are not at, assuming it goes that way, if we're not at a remedy phase by, within a year. And both sides could settle at any point, right? Like we could just, if it ends up going one way or the other, maybe a settlement gets announced. And Zuck has already tried to push for a settlement with the White House, so we'll see. But maybe he can fund another one of Trump's libraries and get a settlement. But that's kind of where things stand right now.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for coming in and kind of giving us on the ground reporting since you've been there. And yeah, we'll get you back here to give updates as these trials progress and as decisions are made. But Alex, thank you so much for
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for tuning in this week to ADSN. And thank you to our sponsor, DashFi, building the only corporate card made for advertisers and helping those businesses earn up to 12% cash back from advertising inefficiencies. Thanks to them for making ADSN possible. And thank you to you, our viewers. We'll see you back next week. Hopefully James is back in studio, and we'll see you then.
From the break of dawn to late night and get the truth.